Welcome back to A View from Bridges TV. We're talking with Sean Stone today, and we're talking with him regarding this issue of Bridges TV maybe going off the air, according to Verizon, who is attempting to put a gag on Bridges TV. And Sean is giving us his viewpoint as to whether or not he feels that this is a fear of Muslim issue or what else it could possibly be. Sean, what do you have to say?
Regarding the shutting down the bridges, well, as I said before, I do think this has to do with an economic collapse that's ongoing and pervasive. This is a depression that we're in. You know, they will cut all extraneous limbs if they need to. I mean, unfortunately, you know, Bridges is the only Muslim station, I suppose, in America at the moment.
That's right.
But you know, I'm not surprised that, of course, they'll cut a channel like this because it's not, you know, Fox News. I mean, there's only so many stations left. I think what you're going to see is an overall shriveling of the news media, and also has to do with frankly what I mean, control of the press. Let's think about it. You know, you don't want independent, free voices to be out there. I mean, this goes back to, you know, people like you know, Hearst and J.P. Morgan, you know, in the early part of the century, recognizing that you have to, if you want to control economy, you have to control media. Because right now, for example, we're in a time when we should be dealing with our own issues as a country. We should be going back to a New Deal principle. We should be trying to revive our economy through sensible, you know, investments and means of doing so, rather than bailouts of the banking system, which got us into the mess in the first place. But rather than having that discussion, we've shifted all focus to the global battlefield, the military state at home and abroad. And so where is the media actually, you know, that's opposing this? What's shocking to me is that no one's standing up and realizing that we are being backed into a war in Iran, or Syria and Iran. And Obama, you know, they say it's the media driving it, but Obama is doing the job, because what he keeps wavering, essentially saying in one sentence, we'll back Israel no matter what they choose to do. Well, what if Israel attacks? Then are we going to follow in terms of attacking? And on the other hand, you know, you know, people around him are emphasizing the fact that we don't want to see a war. We don't want to give Israel the red light, but I'm sorry, we don't want to give Israel the green light, but where's Obama giving Israel the red light? Where is he actually standing up as a president, as a man, as a leader would, and saying, no, this has to be our policy in this region. This has to be our, you know, our approach on this matter. We can't just, why are we, you know, what does he have to suck up to Israel for? Could it, I mean, obviously we've been told that AIPAC is a very influential lobby in regards to the candidates, and Richard Pearls, for example, famously said that if anyone didn't support Israel, they would not last the next election as a congressman or a senator or a president, right? So is Obama so scared of the AIPAC lobby? Is that what's keeping him from actually making a stand as a leader? Or is it simply he's following the lead of the British imperialist lobby that wants to see World War III begin? Because again, that is what is at stake. If this region, if we go to another war, if we see Syria melt down, if there's an attack on Iran without Russia's approval, how will Russia respond to this? They will see this as an attack, despite their effort, despite Putin saying that this cult, he calls this a cult of violence that's spreading between the British and American warmongers at this point. He's saying there's a cult of violence upon the world. It happened, we saw it in Iraq when they destroyed a sovereign nation there. We saw it again in Libya when they overthrew Gaddafi there and unleashed violence on that country. We're seeing it now in Syria. Obviously, Afghanistan is a whole other mess. The country has no power, no running water, and we're surprised when the people start shooting American soldiers for the excuse of a Quran. Nothing to do with the Quran. You know, think about the fact that the conditions these people are living in, you know. And that's quoted to me from a military guy on the ground there, saying, I don't know how these people survive in these conditions. You know, and then we say, oh, we're giving them money and we're making their country so much better. You know, what is this hypocrisy? We're basically treating them like Indians, and we have our military fortresses established in their countries. So, you know, what do you expect if you have, you know, this is a frontier. If this is a frontier, you know, don't be surprised if they attack you. So what's Obama actually doing strategically? I mean, he's done nothing effective towards trying to resolve the crisis, trying to actually deal with nation states, with sovereign nations, with the rulers of those nations. You may not agree with them. I certainly have many issues with the Iranian regime, whether it be the president, the supreme leader, the parliament, But the point is, you have to engage those actors because they're sovereign over their country. When you destroy a country, if you blow up Syria, for example, who are you left to deal with? You're left to deal with Al-Qaeda elements, Mujahideen elements from abroad, various radical factions. Who's in charge? That's what a government is for. It's for authority over its people. So at least you have someone to negotiate with. You can have a dialogue with someone rather than with no one when it comes to a failed state.
Do you have any other thing? Or you guys, is that okay?
No.
Well, here's what I wanted to ask in this regard. You know, Bridges is the only Muslim-owned station in America. We're now about to see, as of March 1st, this will be official, that the National Defense Authorization Act will go into effect. And the kind of thing that can happen, as you know, we've talked about it already, is the suppression of media under various pretexts, giving aid and comfort to enemy combatants. We're no longer fighting nations, we're simply fighting enemy combatants who espouse certain ideas. So we're very close to a kind of intellectual terrorism kind of charge being able to be foisted on some people. Now, you know, you've already alluded quite a bit to British intelligence and the whole idea of the domination of media and, for that matter, policy through British intelligence. Here's what I'd like to ask you. We're perhaps minutes away, not even days, weeks away, minutes away from hearing from Vladimir Putin of Russia and Dmitry Medvedev, who announced on Thanksgiving they were targeting or retargeting their nuclear missiles toward the West. Mm-hmm. And if anybody looks at the map, you see where Russia is and Iran is. Aren't we really looking at the possibility of an immediate confrontation? This is now the 50th anniversary of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Are we looking at something that could instantaneously blow up into a kind of, not just scenario, but an immediate, actual World War III?
I believe that that is what we are looking at. I know from being in Iran that the sentiment from their side is that this is a lot of warmongering rhetoric, but it's not going to go into a war. Why? Because they know that is exactly what would happen. If there was an attack, it would be World War III. Hezbollah would unleash, Hamas would unleash on Israel. If Israel starts to go up, what's America going to do? With America expanding itself into the region through Syria and Iran, what are the Russians going to do? You know, so basically, it's not about Israel and Iran. It's not about Russia and America. This is British imperial politics that the Russians understand because they played this game for 150 years. And the real question is, how lunatic are we going to be to expect that nuclear weapons will not go off in the case of a confrontation? Because don't forget, we didn't expect the Russians to go into, was it Georgia a few years ago?
Yes.
When all of a sudden we were messing around on their border and we were supporting certain factions against them, and all of a sudden the Russian military roared in.
Yeah, we had a military base in Georgia, actually, that people little known fact.
In fact, the Russians intervened again in the Serbian war at the end. Actually, that put an end to the war. And CNN hardly covered that fact. But really, the war ended the day the Russians showed up with tanks, and their helicopters and airplanes. And that was basically it. They said, we're going to put an end to this because you are messing around right on our border.
Well,
and we
for
don't
example, that was the
appreciate
time
this.
we mistakenly bombed the Chinese embassy, if you remember.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the Russians understand this. The Chinese obviously are in a very strange situation because, you know, we're one of their great trade partners, but at the same time, you know, they understand the consequence of this region blowing up. They have a huge Muslim population as well, just like the Russians do. So when you start to create these conditions of creating an amorphous enemy like Al-Qaeda, which really we don't know what Al-Qaeda means anymore. We don't know who they are, except that, you know, if you're a terrorist, you get branded as Al-Qaeda. But in terms of that network, I mean, it's become like 1984, and so when you start charging this against Muslims around the world, I mean, you will get Islamic radical factions. They are expressing their political sentiments through radical action, the same way the Irish have done, the same way that many peoples have done historically, right? And just because they may say in name that they're Islamic, doesn't mean that all Muslims are terrorists. It just means that you're dealing with a tremendous number of people around the world, and you're imposing colonial tactics and traditions that they don't like, And you don't have to be Muslim. I mean, look at what the Vietnamese did. They fought a war because they did not want to have an empire telling them what to do. And that's what we're looking at if we continue on this path of another worldwide crisis.
Miriam, do you have any final remarks?
I'm just thinking, where is the Muslim voice? Where would it come from if Bridges TV went off the air? It's just so important for everyone to have a voice. And if there's so many Christian stations that are currently in the Verizon lineup, why take off the only Muslim station, that they have? It just, it doesn't make sense. It does maybe in their eyes, but to the viewers who want to see it on, they don't seem to be listening to their viewers, who are many of them who want to keep Bridges TV on air.
Sean, I don't know if there's anything that you haven't said yet that you think you need to say, anything that we haven't covered, or any message you'd like to give people as we close out now?
No, I think the most important message, that the basic reason why I converted, I didn't convert, I accepted Islam as I reaffirmed my faith in God. If I was a born-again Christian, I would have gone to the church and rebaptized myself. I felt the same way that I would have done. I just simply, had I done that, I would have felt the same way, which is to feel like I'm reaffirming my faith. And the key of faith is that you have to work with light and knowledge and spread knowledge wherever you go. Because right now I think we're living as a society in a cave, in Plato's cave, because we're waking up not understanding the conditions of how we got here. We're not studying history. We're not looking at the parameters of the world around us. And so we assume that we can walk as a giant and bully other countries as long as we want. Well, if you study history, you know that course only lasts so long. Eventually, you will fall, and you will fall hard, because the greater the giant, the harder the fall. So that's what I fear, and I would love for Americans to just recognize that we are not a bully. We are citizens of a world of many cultures and peoples, and the best aspect of America is assimilation and understanding those different cultures and ideas and mixing them together, and then being a beacon of hope. So let's clean up our house, and let's have faith that we can do that if we're rational people at home, as opposed to trying to intimidate and force our way abroad.